Hello. Well, I've got another example of Washington treating the states like colonies rather than sovereign states. Now, before you get ready to blame the Democrats, this one comes from a Republican. We'll discuss that more next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here again with the Constitution Study, where we read, study, and teach the Constitution, teach the rising generation to be free. I'm glad you could join me today. As always, you can find more information at that website right there, constitutionstudy.com. Feel free to comment, ask questions. I love questions. I love answering questions. I usually go to the top of the queue, so don't forget about those. I also want to make a point. I keep trying to remember to thank Mark and Carol Murphy for letting me use that bumper music. They're the band Rebel North. Their CD is out. You can find them on iTunes, on Amazon, and hopefully in your local music stores. They help support the work that we're doing, and I'm thankful that they let me use their music. Also, if you're going to be in North Georgia on June 8th, I will be out there at the North Georgia I think it's Christian Education Conference, a homeschool conference. You can find more on the website. And I'd love for you to stop by. I got a Facebook note from someone who said they were at the last conference, the Teach Them Diligently conference. And when they went to stop by, I was talking to somebody and they just kept on going. Please stop by, take some time. I love interacting with the people that listen and read what I'm working on, because that's how I know that I'm getting my point across, that the job I'm doing is a good job. And let's face it, it's not perfect, but we try. So please stop by. I love talking to you guys. I love interacting with you guys. So today we're going to talk about some legislation coming out of the Senate called the Extreme Risk Protection Order and Violence Protection Act of 2019. Now, as I said, this is just another attempt by Washington, a blatant attempt to bribe the states to enact law. And like I said, this comes from a Republican, Marco Rubio. So those of you in Florida, thank you very much. That's why I said I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I care if you support the Constitution, if you support liberty. See, there's this big push for so-called red flag laws. And I understand it's proposed as, we want to keep people safe. We want to make sure people are protected, and we want tools to do this. But it's an emotional reaction, not a logical one, and certainly not a constitutional one. You see, what these laws do, red flag laws, and this law is bribing states to pass these red flag laws. Everyone focuses on the Second Amendment, right? Gun rights. And yes, this is an infringement on your right to keep and bear arms. And we'll talk more about that as we go through this. But it's also about your right to private property. You see, if your property can be taken without due process, what good is your property rights? And speaking of that, what about due process? Where are the due process protections in this legislation? This legislation does not require states to protect a citizen's due process rights. It actually requires them to infringe, to subvert, to destroy people's due process rights, all with an agenda that we'll talk about, I guess, a little later. So let's take a look here. Right. A bill. Well, that's always nice. I love a bill. It's a bill to provide family members of an individual who they fear is a danger to himself, herself, or others, or law enforcement with new tools to prevent gun violence. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Oh, we want to protect people. We want to give people tools to make sure that dangerous people are prevented from hurting people. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to repeat this. I'm going to bang this drum over and over and over again. We have not hired people in Congress so that they can ignore the Constitution, because this bill ignores the Constitution. It's repugnant to the Constitution. I find this bill offensive on so many levels. There is absolutely, positively no power delegated to the federal government to provide for the protection of individuals. I'm sorry, Mr. Rubio, and I'm sorry all the other people that are supporting this. That's not the job of the federal government. That's the job of the state government. It is a state job to protect the individuals, not the federal government. We did not give them that authority. Yes, Congress can call forth the militia. They can use it to repel invasion or to suppress an insurrection. That's not the same as providing for individual protection. But here's the other thing. There is nothing in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution forbids Congress from collecting taxes to bribe the states to pass the laws that Congress wants, which is in effect what this law does. This law says, listen, if you pass one of these unconstitutional red flag laws, as long as it meets the certain requirements that we want, we'll give you money. Think about that for a moment. That's what, they call them grants. I'm sorry, these are bribes. There's no other way to describe that. The Constitution gives very specific reasons. The Congress can collect taxes to do the work that Congress is authorized to do in the Constitution. Now, since the Constitution does not authorize Congress to protect individuals, that's one thing. But that's not exactly what they're doing here. They're trying to influence states to pass laws that Congress wants. This is the most, it's desperately important that you understand that. This is Congress trying to wield influence over the states in areas they have no legal authority to. None whatsoever. See, what this is bribery. The act or practice of giving or taking a reward for corrupt practices. The act of paying or receiving a reward for false judgment or testimony, or for the performance of that which is known to be illegal or unjust. That's what we have here. Because forget red flag laws. Let's put that aside for just a second, and let's look at this strictly from the grant standpoint. Apparently, Marco Rubio, as well as the others in the House that have done a similar bill that I've talked about, understand that the federal government simply cannot enact red flag laws. They have no authority. Therefore, they have no say. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to try to influence the states to do it. They're going to promise them a reward to corrupt their practices, meaning to change them from what the local people want. If the people in the states want these, that's a whole nother issue, which we can deal with later. In other words, if due process is followed, that's something else. But what we have here is the federal government trying to influence states to do things the federal government isn't allowed. In other words, treating them like colonies. Now think about that. The federal government is treating the states like dependents. And now be a good little state, do what we tell you to do, and we'll give you some money. If we did that in any other situation, we'd go to jail, wouldn't we? And remember, under Article 2, Section 4, bribery is grounds for impeachment. So technically, since this is the giving of a reward to corrupt the practice or to perform something that is demonstrably illegal, the violation of due process rights, or is unjust, the violation of people's rights, of the guilty until proven innocent metaphor, anybody who would institute this could be impeached. Not that they will, because Congress doesn't follow the Constitution. So yeah, even if you think that your state should pass a red flag law, trying to get Congress to bribe your state to do so is grounds for impeachment. It's a corruption of the idea of separation of powers. We've all been taught in school that, we have three branches and checks and balances, separation of powers, but we forget there is a separation of powers between the federal government and the state. And this is nothing but the federal government trying to wield additional influence over the states. And it's wrong. Now, what else is wrong with the bill? To me, that's reason enough to basically say, Mr. Rubio, slap your hand, go back and read the Constitution, then come back and come up with legislation that you're actually authorized to do. But what else have we got going on? I dealt a lot with this with a House bill called the Jake Laird Act of 2018. I'll put a link in the show notes for this. But that was also about getting this, bribing the states to pass additional red flag laws. But this particular bill, which is very similar, there's only a couple of differences. It's the idea to allow the states to issue, or get the states to pass laws to issue what they call extreme risk protection orders. But here's the problem. They want to do it without due process. Now, someone will say, oh, but there's a process. They get a warrant and yeah, time. Look it up in the dictionary, preferably Webster's 1828. Due process. Due means what you are owed, meaning a process must protect the rights of all the parties involved. And that's important. If you're not protecting the rights, then it's not due process. It's just a process. And just a process is not what is protected by the Constitution. Due process is. So they want your property confiscated without due process, with questionable probable cause. See, basically what they're saying is if someone claims they're afraid that you might be a danger and you own firearms, go take the guns. Go take the firearms and the ammunition, by the way, which I find interesting. Is someone being afraid you might do something wrong due process? What if I were to say, you know what, I'm afraid that you may have been drinking, you may drink and drive. I'm afraid that I've observed you and I think maybe you're going to drive drunk. I'm afraid that you are impaired. So let me go to a judge and we'll just get a warrant to confiscate your car. What's the difference? You're talking about confiscating property based on someone's fear, not proof. Not even probable cause, just someone's expressed fear. What if I were afraid that you might use hate speech online? So we're going to confiscate your access to the internet. We're going to take your computers. We're going to take your smartphones. We're going to suspend all of your accounts because I'm afraid you may do something. It's not really different. They're saying, I'm afraid you may do something bad, so I'm going to infringe on your rights. Your right to property, your right to keep and bear arms, your right to due process, because my fear trumps everything that the government is there to protect for you. Now, that's not the only thing. I love this. In this particular version, the accuser, and they use, different terms. I'm using proper English. The person accusing you of being a danger is to provide a list of firearms and ammunition they believe you possess. That gets used to issue the warrant. Now, if you remember your Fourth Amendment, no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Okay, so we have a warrant without probable cause. Me being afraid is not probable cause. There must be evidence that I actually intend to act. It's the same for every other action. Why is it different for guns? So there's no probable cause. There is an oath or affirmation. That's wonderful. And particularly describing the place to be searched and the person and things to be seized. So what happens when the person that accuses you of being a danger and lists for the court the firearms they believe you own? And that list is incorrect. What happens when they list a firearm you don't actually own? I mean, is it possible that they don't know what they are? Oh, no, we'll just say firearms. You're going to collect all the firearms. Well, first of all, then why do I need a list from the accuser? Second of all, particularly describing the things to be seized. That does not mean contraband, which is basically what saying we're going to take your firearms and ammunition. No. What firearms are you taking? What happens when you own guns that are not on the list? What happens? Think about that for a second. Okay, let's say you've got half a dozen guns and, someone has a list and they got the list wrong. They say you own an AR-15, but you actually own an AK-47. Do they confiscate the AK-47? It's not in the warrant, right? And by the way, where's the AR-15 they're supposed to? Well, I don't actually own an AR-15. Well, now what? See, this is irrational fear moving us to what's going on. Moving people to violate other people's rights, I think more for an agenda than for actual cause. Now, these are what are called ex parte or one-party orders. And it basically means they can take your stuff before you've had a chance to even defend yourself. I don't know about you, but simply because somebody accuses, does that mean that somebody can accuse me of being a drug kingpin and come in and seize under civil asset forfeiture my house and my property? Can someone come and say, I think he stole that, big screen TV? Can they come in and seize it simply because one person accused me? Why are guns treated different than everything else? Because people are afraid of people with guns. Notice, I didn't say they're afraid of guns. They say they're afraid of guns. What they're really afraid of are people with guns. Because the people they're going to call to go collect your guns carry guns. Now, the bill specifically states that its stated purpose is to provide family members with new tools. Well, wait a second. Protection orders already exist. If someone is truly afraid for their life, they can go to the court and get an order of protection. We've seen how good those are, haven't we? This is just another piece of paper. Oh, the new tool is we're going to take their stuff. Wonderful. That's really the only new tool they're adding, is a legal facade that says, I can take your property because I think you might do something bad with it. And I don't know about you, but it's not really that hard to think of ways this can be abused. I mean, my first thought goes to a nasty divorce where one party accuses the other of being dangerous and taking their stuff. I'm afraid that my ex-husband is, or soon-to-be ex-husband is going to do something dangerous, so go confiscate his gun collection. Do you have any proof that he's been dangerous? Oh, no, I'm just afraid. Has he made any threats? No, I'm just afraid. He gets angry sometimes. Okay, let's do it. What about other forms of violence? I mean, are we going to see extreme protection orders for kitchen knives? How about baseball bats? How about human fists? Do you know more people are murdered by the human fist than by firearms every year? Sorry, you got to look that up. If I can find it, I'll put the link in. You see, this all misses, there's two very important points. One is, if someone is determined to commit violence, they will find a way to commit violence. It's human nature. It has been proven time and time and time again. Why do you think the cities with the strictest gun control also have the highest gun violence rates? Why do you think that with all the drug control laws we have such a drug problem in this country? Because people want to do something, they will find a way. Laws don't stop people. Laws merely tell you how to punish people once they've done something wrong. And the other thing is, this is another example of the state punishing innocent citizens for the feared acts of bad actors. If the person is really thought to be dangerous, if you really think that I am dangerous, is the right answer simply to take my guns? Or is the right answer to say, let's find a way to protect others from him? Because guns are just one piece of the puzzle, right? How many people have we seen run over by cars? Oh, next we'll have to confiscate your cars because you think you're dangerous, because you might run over. This isn't about protecting people. That may be, and again, I'm not going to pretend to be inside Mr. Rubio's head, right? I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know if he thinks this is the right and proper use of the legislative power delegated to the Congress to infringe on citizens' rights, because, let's face it, a small group of people are afraid of citizens having guns, and they get listened to a lot. Because that's really what this is about. It's an attempt to displease people who dislike the fact that everyday American citizens own firearms. Again, I said the people they call to get help, they carry firearms. So it's not the firearms they're worried about. It's like somehow they magically think by putting on a uniform or putting on a badge, they become a perfect person. And we can trust them with a gun. But if you don't have that badge, you don't have that uniform, we can't trust you. These are people who wish to use the power of government to make other people act the way they want. We don't think you should have guns, so we're going to use the power of government to take them away, and we're going to give them more power to do that. And if we have to infringe on your right to do that, so be it. See, if Congress can bribe the states to take away your property rights in this area, what's to prevent them from taking your property rights in another area? How much have we heard about hate crimes lately? And about, again, LGBT and pronouns. Is it really such a stretch to say, well, they're confiscating your property because we're afraid that you might be a harm to someone, to saying we're going to confiscate your property or your other rights because we're afraid you're going to say something that will hurt? You're going to offend somebody? Really? They take down monuments because somebody was offended. If Congress can bribe the states to take away this right, they can bribe the states to take away other rights as well. And that's really, I think, the point I want to drive home. You see, yes, this is a Second Amendment gun rights issue, and I don't disagree with that. But there's so much more just under the surface. Sure, there are people who are going to say, well, it's taking away guns, that's a good thing, I don't care. What happens when it's not guns? If we allow the government to decide they have the power to take away your property without due process, what's to stop them to take other property? If we allow the government to decide it has the power to infringe on our rights for the greater good, what's to prevent them from taking other rights as well? How are your rights protected if we allow the government to decide what rights they'll bother to protect? I don't disagree with the people that focus on the Second Amendment issue of it, but I really wish people would look at the other parts of this, that would look at the property rights, the due process rights, the rights around warrants, what about the right to face your accuser? if you go through this bill, you'll see, well, after a while, you can go back and you can ask for your stuff back. Really? Is that the way the government was set up? That the government can do what it wants and then maybe we can go back and beg them to give us our stuff back? That's what this bill is establishing. Another scenario where we have to go begging to the government. The government tells us what we can do, and we get to go to the government and beg for our opportunity to have our stuff back. It's illegal. It's immoral. Ultimately, I believe it's irrational, because any basic examination of these types of attempts, both in this country and others, show it doesn't work. If we want to allow people, if we want people to be protected from people we think may harm them, then let's find out ways that do so without infringing on people's rights. Let's find ways that we can either separate, because again, if a person's stabbed with a knife or shot with a gun, does it really matter? Why are they only focusing on guns? Because it's not about protecting people. That may be what they're thinking about, but that's not really what's underneath here. It's about creating a method whereby establishing this general idea that people don't have a right to certain types of property, that property can be taken away at the government's whim. And that, to me, is really dangerous. It's a dangerous precedent. I see so much more that's coming from this, and I see very, very, very few people who are talking about this. So hopefully, now that you know a bit more about this, you'll talk to your senator, you'll contact their office and say, wait a second, what about Fourth Amendment protections? What about Fifth Amendment protections? What about the right to face my accuser? What about innocent until proven guilty? What about? Can we find a way, if you truly, truly wish to protect people who are afraid of others, for valid reasons, then let's find a way that actually protects them from the bad actions of others that wish to do them harm. And let's not use this as an excuse to violate the rights of American citizens because they happen to use a right you don't particularly like. So I'm sure this will come up again, because I don't see this going away anytime in the near future. But I hope you thought a little bit and looked a little deeper than the knee-jerk reaction about Second Amendment and gun rights, about property rights, about due process rights, about the basic jurisprudence, the basic idea that you are due having your rights protected by the legal system. And, go back to the beginning, maintaining the separation between the states and the federal government. The federal government bribing the states is wrong. And any legislation where the government is trying to bribe the states, to influence the states to do what the federal government wants, is wrong. And it's time we start holding our elected officials accountable. They work for us. It's time that we tell them what to do, rather than them telling us how they're going to infringe on our rights. So let me know. Leave a comment. Leave a question. I like questions. I like to know what you're thinking. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you have something you would like me to cover? Please put those comments in, and I'll do my best. Most of all, I wish you a great day, and I hope to see you again the next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.